Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today in my garage as I show you what I have going on these two shelving units. I have a hint. They're either plants, tubers, bulbs, or corms. So let's go. We are nearing the middle of December, and so far everything is looking really good. I'm very pleased. I like to use my garage as a place to store a lot of things when it comes to plants. It's a perfect temperature for most plants that I have that I'm trying to overwinter. I typically try to overwinter either tubers, corms, or bulbs that are not hardy in my area, or I try to overwinter certain perennials or annuals that are also not hardy in my area. So what I'm planning to do today is just take you in and show you what I have going on over here, what I've done so far in terms of care, and what the plan is going forward. You'll notice that these two shelving units are quite tall. I love them because they are a great use of vertical space. Also, they are up against an interior wall, and that way I know that they are not getting too cold. They're staying nice and warm here in the garage. Our temperatures can dip as low as negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit during the coldest parts of the winter. That is way too cold for these plants. Therefore, in the garage, they are very comfortable, and typically the temperatures do not fall below freezing. So I feel very comfortable leaving everything here. However, I do keep a thermometer in here, and if I do see that the temperatures are getting anywhere near freezing, I can just take care of this area by throwing it over a heavy comforter. I've done that in the past years, and that has really helped. Okay, so let me take you in for a closer look so you can see what I have over here. So let me start by saying you may notice that these plants are in pots that have a company name or the pots are branded. However, these are just pots that I am reusing. I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. What we're looking at here is a flat of Dusty Miller plants that I started from seed last year. Now, Dusty Miller sometimes comes back here in my zone, but sometimes it doesn't. So I wanted to make sure I had some Dusty Millers overwintering in my garage, and I thought that this was a great way to do it. And what was important to me was to find big enough containers for each plant so that there's plenty of room to grow for the plant, because throughout the winter it's going to keep growing, and I just want to make sure they don't get too root bound or pot bound. So I come out here every day in the garage because this is where I park my car, but I definitely don't check on my plants every day. I probably check on them about once a week. And even though I just watered these within the last week, I'm noticing a few of them might seem a little on the drier side. And if that's the case, I can give them all a small drink of water. The key is I'm trying to keep all these plants alive, but I also don't want to give them too much water. They're technically dormant right now. And so if I give them too much water, there's a chance that they might rot. So there's a fine line between not enough water and too much water. But I can just tell by looking at the color of the soil that this one here is a little on the darker side, and this one here is a little on the lighter side. So when it comes to watering, I just use my best judgment. And let's say today I was going to water, I'd give this one a little drink of water, but I wouldn't even bother with that one. That's what's very important. You just want to make sure you're treating each plant individually. You don't want to just say, oh, today's watering day, I'm watering everything, because this one right here already has plenty of water. I don't want it to rot. So those are things that I look for. But overall, I'm very pleased. I think they look very good. And I can even tell that some of them are sending off new growth at the base. And if I notice a lot of new growth going on at the base, sometimes I might come in and just cut back some of the top growth. You know, some of these plants are definitely an experiment. This is a type of grass. It was in a large container that I had received from a friend, and I divided the grass actually into 4 pieces. So I'm just trying to, again, I'm basically just trying to limp these plants along enough so that I can then plant them outside in the summertime. This right here is just one small little sprig of dichondra silver falls. And I was able to successfully overwinter that in my garage last year. And that's the beauty, is then I didn't have to buy it this year. And I have a lot more of the dichondra silver falls in another tray. This little sprig looks sad, but it's alive. Over here we have calibrachoa, And I've never overwintered this plant before, so this is definitely an experiment for me. I can see right here, there's a tiny bit of new growth. And so that's the key. It's not going to look great. I really cut it back. I just want to see if I can overwinter it and then get it going again in the springtime. Okay, we have a few things going on over here. We have some mums. And even though mums are perennial in my zone, the problem with planting mums, these are all mums, the problem with planting mums is that they need a long time for their roots to establish. I received a lot of these from my friend who has a backyard plant nursery, and I received these in the fall. And to be honest with you, since mums take a long time for their roots to establish, I didn't want to take a chance and lose these mums. Therefore, I am just overwintering them in my garage, but definitely in the spring, they need to get right out in the ground so they have plenty of time to overwinter. Because I don't know if you knew this, but mums are typically a perennial, especially if they're a garden mum. So you can see they are definitely pushing out a lot of new growth. I have cut back some of the pieces that didn't look so good. And I want the plants to put their energy into creating new growth. And that's what they're doing. And I recently just watered all of these. And when I pick them up, I can tell they're pretty heavy. You can see that the soil color is pretty dark. They don't need any water. They're perfectly fine. Over here is a type of ivy, and I'm just overwintering this in my garage. And then here's some more of the calibrachoa. And you can see actually this looks pretty good. And the ones back here, maybe not so good. And just at quick glance, I can see that this one needs a little bit of water. So I will definitely be watering some of these plants. But again, it's important to not just go overboard with watering everything. I can tell most of these plants are good. They don't need water. And even if you compare these two right here, you can clearly see that this one needs more water than this one. Here we have some more of the calibrachoa. And how nice is that in December here? It's blooming. I love that. So that looks okay. Again, they're just barely alive, but they are not dead. So that's important. And over here, I can't recall the name of this plant. If I find it, I will put it up on the screen. It looks like an artemisia, but I want to double check that. So I will put that up on the screen for you. And then over here are some dusty millers. This one doesn't look as good, but you know, you never know. Give it some time. These look pretty good. During my younger years, when I first got into gardening, I used to buy this plant every single year. And I bought a ton of them to put in my pots and my containers. It got very expensive. And I'm almost positive they are hardy in zone 7, and I'm zone 5. And this plant is a trailing vinca. Now, I do have a friend that has a backyard plant nursery, and she told me in her microclimate on the south side of her house, she has this planted up right against the house, and it does come back every year. So I am going to experiment with that next year. However, you can see that it's even pushing some new growth right here, which is great. So it's worth trying to overwinter plants, especially if they are hardy in a zone close to yours, but they might not survive outside. I just overwintered one plant last year, and then I turned it into a handful of plants, more than a handful. I mean, I have a whole tray here. So it is so worth it, and I look so forward to being able to use this plant in many of my pots, containers, window boxes, hanging baskets, you name it. And this one here I can see is looking a little dry. So when it comes to this whole tray, I will probably just water this one. Here are more perennial mums that I received from my friend that has a backyard plant nursery. So they're looking good and pushing out new growth. Very excited about that. And then here's more of that dichondra silver falls. And how exciting, again, that by next spring, I'm going to have a ton of this plant. I just need to keep this plant alive and going, and then I will be in luck with those. And then I just have more perennial mums over here. So in the fall, I did buy some perennial mums that were very pretty and that were different than anything else that I had. And I have a total of 5 pots of perennial mums that are also called garden mums and sometimes referred to as Belgian mums. And they are definitely hardy in my zone. I just need to get them through the winter. And you can see, if you look in here, that there is definitely new growth at the base. And that's a good sign. The plant is even trying to send out some blossoms. So I am very pleased with that. I have a little bud over here. And I just need to keep taking care of these plants. They seem good and wet right now. And if I wanted to, I could come in here and give them a trim so they look a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater. But that's not the priority. The priority is to make sure they don't freeze. The priority is to make sure they have enough water to stay alive, but not too much water so that they rot, and then to get them planted out in the landscape in the springtime. But I'm very excited. They look very good. Do you remember when we planted a bunch of spring bulbs into different containers? Well, this was one of them, and it's a nice, pretty large container, and this has the tete-a-tete daffodils in them. We planted a number of these pots together, and I did the same thing last year. Where I live, the deer like to munch on my tulips. So one way to not have to deal with that problem is to plant tulips in pots and have them on my porch. So that's what I'm doing this year, as well as some daffodils that I had on hand. And when it comes to these, you can see just when I do this and push the soil aside that it's still pretty wet. It's always good to check about 1 inch down. And I don't want these to rot. And if I had these pots outside on my porch and they froze, that would not be good. The daffodils and tulips can't handle that freeze if they're inside of a pot like this here where I live in New Hampshire. So I do need to bring them in during the winter months. And then I will bring them out in the spring, and we will all get to enjoy them when I give you a video update on all of these. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, so I have a total of 5 pots right now that have spring bulbs in them. However, I have plenty more bulbs that I still need to get potted up. I'll be the first to admit I am not a big fan of houseplants. I did buy this particular plant. It's called the angel wing begonia because I saw it in a garden and it was absolutely beautiful. But I don't want to keep it inside over the winter. I did that last winter. So it's basically survival of the fittest for this poor plant. I will keep it watered, but other than that, it just needs to survive until next spring. And if it does, then it can go out in a pot or somewhere in my landscape. I have boxes and boxes of dahlias, and I just put them in cardboard boxes. They are inside with peat moss, and I had pre-moistened this peat moss when I put the dahlias in here. Now I can tell just by looking at it that the peat moss is getting dry. So it's a great time for me to go ahead and water these dahlias. But before I do that, let's check on a few of them just to see how they're looking. And they're looking good. They look nice and healthy. They're nice and firm. And this is a great time also for me to check for rotting. If I do notice any dahlia that's rotting, I absolutely want to pull it out at this time because that rot could spread to other dahlias in this box. Here's another one over here. But yeah, they look very good. And my garage stays cool enough that I'm not too worried about them sprouting too early. They will start sprouting when the conditions are right, when it starts warming up. But you don't want your dahlias to sprout too early. You want them to rest. This is a resting period. And I have dahlias over here and I have some over here. The big thing is that they're not touching. So I'm going to show you how I go about watering in the dahlias that are in this box. I just have a small handheld water sprayer. And what we want to do is just lightly mist the peat moss. We don't want things to get too wet in here, but enough so that the peat moss has some moisture. And when I close the box, it just adds a little bit of a humid environment for my dahlias. And that's it. And I won't check on my dahlias again for another month. That should be plenty to hold them over in terms of moisture. Now, if I had to guess with how many boxes I have of dahlias, well, there's some bigger boxes, there's some smaller boxes, but I would say there's about maybe 8 or 10 boxes this size. So we have lots of dahlias to play with for next year. Over here is a box of my tuberous begonias. And I'm just checking to make sure that there's no rot. And I'm also just making sure that they feel firm. And it does. This one tuber right here feels very good. I have another one over here. And what's exciting is come springtime, we'll start seeing everything waking up and you'll start seeing sprouts on these. But right now, they still need to sleep. And I have these in peat moss as well. And this peat moss had a little bit of moisture in it. But I have to tell you, last year when I stored a lot of my tubers and my bulbs, I did not add any additional water to them. The only ones that I worried about adding water to were my dahlias. All the others stayed fairly dry. I initially put a little bit of water in here, but that's it. I don't want these to rot. Look how huge that is. They look great. And I just try to cover them up a little bit. Now, when I stored these in the fall, I did not write down the colors. So it will be fun for us when we start planting these to see what colors these tuberous begonias are. And notice I'm not sealing this tight. I want a little bit of circulation of air to be happening with each of these boxes. In here, we have our canna lilies. They are very small, but that's all right. I just never got them planted out in a big container. So my goal for this year is to just get them to overwinter, and you can see they look very good. And next year, I will definitely get them in pots, and you will see how huge these will get after just one season after being in a pot. They're also in peat moss, and the peat moss was initially moistened just a tiny bit, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to add any more moisture. It feels very good, and I don't need to add any more moisture into this. Here's a little teeny tiny box that has peacock orchids in it. And when it comes to my peacock orchids, I had a whole ton of little babies. And I'm trying to figure out what I might do with all these different bulbs and tubers that I have. Dahlias do really well in nice pots, but when it comes to the peacock orchids and the gladiolus, I might put them in a raised bed because I want these little babies to get bigger. That's how you propagate them, is you just let them keep growing. But if I go fishing down below, there are some slightly bigger ones in here. I did have these layered a little bit when I put them in here, but it's okay if you move things around. So they look pretty good. They're still, again, they're nice and firm. I feel like it's Christmas. Let's open up this present. These are my calla lilies. And even though they stayed in their little pre-sprouting trays during the summer, they still bloomed for me. They were so beautiful. And they look very good. They look very healthy. So you see a common theme. Everything's stored in cardboard boxes, and everything is stored with peat moss. And typically speaking, I try to do it so that things aren't touching each other. Now, when you have little teeny tiny bulbs, that's hard to do. So I don't worry about it too much. But everything looks good in there. It's such a great feeling to be able to save money by overwintering all these. And it's a great way to then keep propagating what I have. In this box are gladiolus and a ton of little babies. But at the very bottom, I'm not going to go fishing. They're at the base, are much bigger gladiolus bulbs. They're like this big. they all will eventually become a nice big gladiolus bulb. And I have the patience. I want to be able to propagate and keep getting more and more bulbs from my yard, and then I can even share some of them. Did I mention I'm not a big houseplant person? These are very pretty succulents that I received from my daughter from her college that she attends. And they've definitely divided over time. It started with one, and now I have many. These actually, I don't think look very good. They should be this color. But either way, I'm keeping them in the garage. And if I'm able to overwinter these, I think these would look beautiful in a nice pot or a container. So I'm going to try. I'm going to try to overwinter them and see how they do. I think I love the blue color, and I would love to see them outside in a pot. I have my work cut out for me. These are a bunch of bulbs, and they appear to be mostly tulips. They were from pots that I had last year. They looked so beautiful, so gorgeous on my porch. And then I put them in the basement during the summer months so that they could rest. And then I brought them upstairs during the late summer, early fall, so I could start planting them in pots. I just haven't had the time. So I am going to be working on these over the next week, and I will be getting these into pots. You can see some are little babies and some are much bigger. So my plan of attack is I will be putting all the bigger ones together in pots, and then all the little babies are just going to go in a different pot all by themselves. And the goal for the babies is just to get them bigger. I want them to grow and get bigger so that one day they can be a big bulb. So I have all of these. You can see they are sprouting. They want to get into some dirt. And I have all of these here, and I have more, just wait. So what we're looking at here are very pretty types of daffodils that are color blends that came from my sister-in-law. And I planted out the biggest ones that she gave me, but all these smaller ones still need to get potted up. And some of them look really good. Most of them actually look good. It's just some are sprouting faster than others. And they're all still firm, which is a good thing. And over on this side, I'm almost positive these are a daffodil. Now, what kind of daffodil, what color, will totally be a surprise. You can see they look very, very small. I got them from someone that buys plants from me from my backyard plant nursery. He dug them all up and he gave them to me. They must have been clustered very close together in his landscape. But nonetheless, I am so excited to have these. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these, but I think that they're not going to bloom the first year. So I think I'm just going to put them in a number of pots, but I need to space them out so that they put on some growth and get bigger for next year. Time consuming indeed, but I definitely want to get this done as well. I just want to give all these plants a chance to grow and do something for next spring. Now you would think after what I just showed you that I would not be going out and buying any bulbs. Are you like me? Can you just not give up a good deal? These were marked down to under $7 for 50 bulbs. So I spent under $15 for 100 tulips, which I think is a really good deal. And I think they're going to look very pretty. They are very healthy. They're already sprouting. So I will be getting these put into pots as well. All the bulbs that I've shown you today will be going into pots and will be stored in my garage during the winter months. And then come springtime, I will have them out on my front porch, my side porch, my back porch, and maybe even my bedroom porch. I have lots of porches to put pots, so this will be very exciting. I am really enjoying the space in my garage. It's basically just another extension of a gardening room that I can utilize when it's a little too cold outside. It was really dark in here actually, and I recently had my husband put up some LED lights. For $20 for one LED light times two, it really lights up the space. And I have a little space heater, so when I set up my folding table and my folding chair, which is right over here. There's the chair. Over here is the folding table tucked away. But I will just set them up right over here. And I love having my cup of coffee or maybe my laptop so I can watch some YouTube gardening videos. And I love just working out here. It's a lot of fun. And it makes this type of process not so dreadful. It makes it enjoyable. So I highly encourage you to try different things, experiment. And then find a place where you can go and you can check on your little plant babies or your little bulb babies. It just makes the winters go by a little bit faster, I feel. So my hope is that this video motivated you, maybe it helped you, maybe it gives you some ideas of things to try, but I'm looking so forward to showing you all of these plants, all of these bulbs, corms, tubers, you name it, and giving you an update, maybe on a monthly basis, on how things are looking and what to do next, because eventually I am going to have to pot up my dahlias. I'm going to have to divide them before I pot them up. I'm going to have to cut back my mums and get them planted in the landscape in the spring. I have all my bulbs that will start sprouting, the tulips, the daffodils. They will need to go outside so that they get some sun. I'll be sure to bring you along on that journey. Until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.